Good morning and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Nav Chima from Access Pay. This is the 9th episode of Access Pay's Finance Transformation Unlocked, FTU, a series of short webinars aiming to help corporates and financial institutions navigate the ever-changing world of payment automation to banks and receiving statement data back. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague, Tom Livick. Tom, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Nav. My name is Tom Livick, and I'm part of the sales team here at Access Pay. We've been working with some of our existing customers on ISO20022 migration, specifically for non-bank financial institutions, so NBFIs and banks as well. And I'm looking forward to sharing what we've learned from those projects this morning.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. So we're going to be spending the next 20 minutes or so talking through what does the new ISO 2022 standards actually mean to finance teams. We're aiming to finish by 10:30 a.m., not p.m. We're not going to hold you all day, I promise. This session is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to go back and rewatch at any point as well. So you should be able to see an agenda slide. So today we'll be discussing a background to ISO for corporates and non-bank financial institutions, the timing for change, advice on implementing, including any gotchas, and finally, the cost for making the change to ISO. So due to the nature of the subject today, this session is going to be quite technical. However, we are going to use some industry standard terms and phrases. And if you do have any questions, please go to the chat box at any point and we'll do our best to answer any questions as we go along. So yeah, without further delay, let's get started. Tom, my first question to you is, can you please briefly explain what ISO 20022 is and what does it mean to finance teams?
Sure, Nav. So speaking briefly about ISO 20022, which in itself is a mouthful, it's not going to be that easy. But if we start from some basic principles. So what is ISO 20022? Well, it's a global messaging standard for all types of finance communications. It's actually an international standard which is independent of the message that's being delivered and of the network that the message is being delivered over. The standard isn't controlled by any single organization, so it's not controlled by the banks, for example, and anyone in the finance industry can participate. So it's an international standard. Looking at the next level down, ISO 20022 provides a logical structure to support those business processes. So, for example, let's assume this could be a corporate payment that's been delivered, or it might be a treasury transaction, or it could be a bank statement. So that's the logical structure. And then the third level is how those logical messages are actually represented and delivered to the banks. The syntax that's been adopted by ISO is an XML format, but the standard itself doesn't specify it has to be an XML. It could be other formats going forward in the future. So for today's conversation,
just to kind of summarize there, please do correct me if I'm wrong. So ISO 20022 is a global standard for payments information, and the adopted format is XML.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct.
Perfect.
So it is an international standard that's recognized by across the world, and this XML format is the format that's currently being used.
Brilliant, thank you.
And it's actually interesting when you hear the conversations, people start talking about ISO 20022, but they're actually using lots of different acronyms. So they might not use ISO 20022. They might say XML, or they might say MX, and the MX being a replacement for the MT, which is the legacy Swift format. Or they may start talking about PAIN or PAX or CAMT. But all these acronyms are basically meaning the same thing. They're referring to this transition from the traditional legacy Swift MT formats to this new ISO format. Okay, so they're really thinking about, there are two main areas really to consider: payments and statements. And in addition, we need to split the conversation between corporates and financial institutions. So if we start initially focusing on corporates and thinking about the corporate businesses, there are different messages which are being shown on the screen now. So for example, a MT101 message, which would traditionally be used as a CHAPS transaction for delivery to the bank, that's being replaced with a PAIN 001 message. Standard 18 was the format that's used by banks for direct credits and direct debits, and that's also being replaced by the PAIN001, the XML format. So this transition is happening as we speak. And sorry, there's another one that's on the screen, which is PAIN008. So for BACS direct debits, PAIN008 is the format that's being replaced by Standard 18 as well. So comparing these different formats, comparing the PAIN001 with the MT101, it's not just about a transformation of the file formats or a change in file format. The new formats actually bring about some benefits, and there are 3 significant benefits that's worthwhile raising. So the first one is that the traditional MT formats only supported a single transaction in a file, whereas the new PAIN001 formats support both bulk transactions and single transactions. So it's possible then to include multiple transactions in a single file. We're using PAIN001. If you think about CHAPS or those types of transactions, international cross-border payments, that effectively is one transaction in one file, whereas in PAIN it could be multiple transactions. And so because of that, there's potentially, and please check with your bank, but potentially the bank will charge less because for those transactions, because they're dealing with a single file rather than multiple files and then having to process those transactions that are in that single file. The third benefit that's worth touching on is if you think about, even with Swift, where there is a return message coming back, Swift will deliver an ACK or a NAC message coming back. It's not actually at bank level, that's coming back from the Swift network. So the organization, the corporate, the financial institution doesn't actually know with an MT101 message what the bank is doing with it. Whereas with the new PAIN001 format, we get something called a payment status report. And the payment status report is both at transaction level and at file level. So it gives a real benefit to the corporate or the FI, what's actually the bank is dealing with that message, or more importantly, if the bank has rejected it. Yeah. So it's a warning signal that a payment has been successfully or unsuccessful.
Perfect. So basically, all this means that the legacy MT formats are changing to the new PAIN format. So if a corporate has BACS direct credits or CHAPS payments, they'll need to be converted now to a PAIN001 file.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So there's this transition is happening from the legacy formats, which is BACS, as you say, Standard 18, and CHAPS is MT101s, international cross-border MT101s. All those are being transferred to this new format, this new XML, PAIN001, PAIN008 format.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so let's now think about so we're focusing on corporates. Let's move now to what does this mean for a non-bank financial institution. So the acronym there is an NBFI. So what does it mean to a financial institution rather than a corporate? And again, there's a new set of message types that are being introduced. So traditionally, an MT103 would be a payment instruction from an FI to a bank. And that MT103 is being replaced with a PACS008 message. And the same for a bank-to-bank payment, which traditionally would be an MT202. So the 202 is being replaced with a PACS009. And then as with the corporates, the payment status report is another benefit that we get for FIs as well. So whereas it was a PAIN002 message, which is the payment status report that comes back in the corporate world, in the FI world, this is called a PACS002, but effectively it's doing the same thing. It's providing an updated status in real time of what the bank is doing with that payment instruction. Okay, then finally on statements. So even the statement messages are changing. So MT940s, which is an end of day statement that's been delivered by the banks for many years, and MT942s, which is the intraday statement, both of those message types are being replaced. So a 940 is becoming a CAMT 53, and a 942 is becoming a CAMT 52. So the organizations using the traditional MT statement types will now need to be able to accept the new formats in order that they can reconcile transactions or create a cash position.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Tom. We've not given you the easiest task today, so thank you for explaining that so clearly. So just to summarise, for banks and non-bank financial institutions, the current MT formats will be replaced by PAX messages, and the CAMT messaging will be replacing the existing MT bank statement data you get back, so your MT 940s and 942s.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So it's these new acronyms which we need to learn, that's just effectively replacing what's already there, with the only differentiator, and actually it's a significant differentiator, is this payment status report message, which is a PAIN 002 in the corporate world, or it's a PAX 002 in the NBFI world.
Great, thanks. So this sounds like a significant change for corporates, for non-bank financial institutions and banks. When do these changes actually come into effect?
So the original plan was to introduce the changes from 2022 to 2025. However, the Bank of England have delayed the change for CHAPS to the new format, to that the new PAX format, which is now going to happen in June 2023. However, for most corporates and NBFIs, the best advice I can give is to contact your counterparty bank and confirm their timeline for changes. And the information that we've received from the banks we've been engaging with is they're actually going to run a parallel process for both the legacy format and the new XML format. And that parallel process will run probably until 2025.
Right, okay, thank you. And what would be your advice to any organisations out there who haven't yet considered the impact of the changes in payment and statement format?
So my first recommendation is to obviously contact your bank and understand the bank's timelines for parallel running. When will they stop accepting the legacy MT format? So once you can understand the timelines for your banks, then you can start putting together a plan around that. We've been working with HSBC and Barclays, and both banks are running the MT and MX messages in parallel until 2025. So in other words, there's no need to panic just yet. However, based on these timelines, and we know bank projects are complex and they take some time, so create a migration strategy which fits inside that timeline for your organization, leaving plenty of contingency towards the cutoff point. So for example, you might want to think about a migration project starting in 2024, and maybe it ends in December 2024, and therefore you've got enough contingency in 2025 to address any issues that might come out from that migration.
Perfect, thank you. So get in touch with your bank and work out some sort of parallel running process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Try and understand what the bank's projects are, and the bank's timeline. If you have multiple banks, then those timelines may be different between your banks, but it's important to understand what those timelines are and then work that into your own plan for your own organization.
Perfect. So as you know, a lot of time and effort has gone into configuring back office systems in a certain way. So is it possible to implement the new standards without impacting your back office systems?
Okay, so this is a great question. The short answer is effectively it depends, and there are two options. You can update your back office systems to support the new format. So obviously that is a change to the organization's back office system. But we would refer to that as a DIY, do-it-yourself approach. And this would involve looking at your current back office system, the file formats that you're currently delivering to the bank, and any changes that can be that need to be made. The next point is, are you able to receive these really crucial payment status reports? If you remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned the PSRs, the payment status reports, PAX 002 for FIs and PAIN 002s for the corporates. And the reason why those are so important is because, one, it's different from the MT world. That doesn't exist. Those messages don't exist in the MT world. And secondly, is they give significant value back because they tell you in real time whether the bank has accepted the payment instruction, or more importantly, they've actually rejected the payment instruction. And if they have rejected it, then you're able to do something about that in real time. And then the third point is on that new statement data. So I mentioned before that MT940s and MT942s have been around for a very long time. And most back office systems, whether it's an ERP like SAP or Oracle, whether it's a reconciliation engine like AutoRec or Blackline, or whether it's a treasury management system, whether it's Kyriba or Eon or another, Cooper or another one, those TMSs have been specifically built around 940s and 942s. So can they also receive the new CAMT 52 and CAMT 53 statement format? So that would be a DIY service, if you like, and obviously that would impact your back office system. If you think about the resources that might be needed for that, it could take, obviously, depends on the organization and the size of organization and how many banks are involved and how many back office systems. But let's just say that could take 4 or 5 people. Think about the finance team, IT resources, specialist resources who understand the ERP or treasury management system. So what I'm saying is potentially it's a significant change to the business process. Okay, so that's if you like, that's the first option. The second option would then be you could start considering some translation services and an organization that could convert the MT format to the XML. And actually Swift is a really good resource for that translation service. There's a link that's going to appear, so we can use you could use this link to go to Swift and get some more information on the Swift service. However, what we've seen when we've been working with the high street banks is that actually, even when we've delivered a transformation from MT to XML, there's been a few new fields which don't exist in the MT world. So it's not just about a simple translation of the message converting MT to XML. It's actually about these new fields which need to be completed in order that the payment instruction is going to be accepted by the banks. And it's these new fields that basically the files need to be enriched as well as transformed.
Perfect. So on the face, it's a file transformation exercise, but it sounds like there are a few gotchas in there as well.
Yeah, so the gotchas is always the case with these types of projects, right, Nav?
There's always gotchas, yeah.
Those gotchas. And this is what we found. This is the learning I mentioned right at the start. It's quite interesting because there's a field which is called a purpose of payment code, which has to be populated in the PAX message. And we were receiving an MT103 message from our banking customer, and actually that had to be translated into a PAX message, but the MT103 didn't include the purpose of payment code. So what we've been able to do is enrich the file that we've received, including this parameter so it has the correct field populated, and then that would then get delivered out to their counterparty bank with the purpose of payment code included. The second field is a legal entity identifier. So LEI is the acronym. And again, this LEI field isn't included or wasn't included in the MT103 message that we were receiving. So we used a database lookup from the Bank of England to again populate that and enrich the file that we received. So the file that ultimately was going to the counterparty bank had the correct LEI included in it, as well as the correct purpose of payment code. So this file enrichment was a significant benefit because the impact was that our customer bank that we were talking to, that we were supporting with this whole transformation project, didn't have to change their back office system. Basically, we uplifted and enriched the file that we'd received so that the file that's actually ultimately delivered to their counterparty bank is being able to be processed either as a PAX 008 or as a PAX 009 message.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. And I guess one of the most important questions that I know everyone will be thinking and wanting me to ask, what is the cost of making these changes?
So the cost is a really hard one to answer, but let's try and do something and put at least put something around it so that there's an order of magnitude here, and obviously it will vary. Yeah. It's going to vary depending on the organisation. and are they already? How are they connected to their counterparty bank today? So let's make a few assumptions. Let's go back to the scenario I mentioned just a minute or so ago, the DIY scenario, where an organization is going to try and make this change themselves. So I mentioned that potentially it could be 4 or 5 staff that could be included in that type of project. So you're going to need a specialist ERP resource, you're going to need some specialist finance resource, possibly some IT resources. And then that organization is obviously going to have to engage with their bank or banks to make sure the files are the correct format and so on. So that's as I mentioned earlier, that's a significant project. This isn't something that can be done fairly easily. The next approach is then be using a third party. And obviously, coming from AccessPay, I can't speak on behalf of other third-party organisations. So the organisation, that corporate, that FI would have to speak to the third party to get some support from them and find out what's required. I guess what I can do is talk through what it means from an AccessPay point of view. And there are a number of factors that we would consider. So, for example, how many banks are we connecting to? How many back office systems are we going to connect to make this file transformation and potentially the enrichment that I mentioned as well? So if we just assume there's one bank that we're going to connect to and there's one back office system that we're going to carry out that file transformation, that file enrichment, then it's likely to be somewhere around 10 to maybe £20,000 as an annual fee for that type of transformation and enrichment service. I guess the point here is it could be less and it could be more depending on the complication. But what I'm not saying is this isn't £100,000 and this is definitely not £1 million project, at least not from an AccessPay point of view. And we would obviously work with the customer to understand what their requirements actually are.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you. So it really depends. The cost really depends on which route you go down, whether it's kind of a DIY scenario or you go into a third party like AccessPay, and then also back office systems and how many banks as well.
Yeah, and I guess probably one other point to raise on that, along with the cost, is that there are some special resources that are required here in order to carry out the transformation from MT to MX. As I mentioned, the gotchas around file enrichment would delay a project significantly if somebody went down a DIY route. And from what I've seen, looking at these projects and looking at the teams that we've involved in, both in our customer side and on the bank side, to implement this, you would need, if you went down the DIY route, that organization would need some specialist skills already in-house that have this. This wouldn't be something that you could just try and, I've got an IT guy who's got some experience in working with SAP or Oracle. They would also need to understand these message formats as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom, and really well explained. I'm personally all out of questions. I do see we've got a couple in the chat box, which I'll come back to in a second. But we also did have a few questions the other day from a customer, which I was hoping you could help answer.
Sure.
So the first one is, we are currently sending an MT103 to our counterparty bank. However, going forward, our Nostro is saying that we will need to generate a PAX008 message and a PAX009 message. Is it possible to take an MT103 and automatically create a PAX008 or 009? Okay,
so this is a good question. So if you think about what's happening here, going back to one of the first slides, the MT103 is a conversion to a PAX008 message. So that transformation is normally fine. An MT103 to a PAX009, that 009 is the equivalent of an MT202. So effectively, we're actually taking a 103 and creating the pseudo equivalent of a 202, which is the PAX009. And we did this for one of the high street bank customers I've been talking about. So it is possible, and there's a special tag that we looked at. So it's field 59 in that we were actually able to look to see if it contained a BIC, and the BIC being for the organization that's generating the payments. So obviously a 202 is a bank to bank, and actually we looked to see if this field contained a BIC, and if it did, then we knew it was effectively a bank to bank transaction, and therefore it's a PAX009. So we were able to create the code and uplift the application to support this type of transformation.
Perfect. And in your experience, how quickly can a service that can transform empty messages to CAMT be enabled?
Okay, so again, it's dependent on lots of factors, and it may be taking some of the assumptions we've been making so far. So let's say it's a one bank and it's a one ERP connection that we're connecting to. Then that could be a 12-week project. It could be less, and obviously it could be more depending on their actual requirements. So we need to scope that out. To put something down, a 12-week implementation is probably correct using an Access Pay service. And yeah, as I said, we need to scope that out in a bit more detail to work out exactly how long it would be.
Cool, thank you, Tom. So let's just have a quick look if we've got anything in the chat box. And we've got one question from Debbie Thomas. Thank you for asking. Does that mean if we load a text file for backs, we need to upload an XML file, or is this managed by Access Pay? So I'm guessing this is around the kind of transformation piece.
Yeah, that's again great question. So taking the customer journey we've been on so far, it wouldn't actually impact if we had a customer who was using backs today with Access Pay, we would carry out that transformation for them. So whatever text file you're sending to Access Pay today, going forward, we would transform that rather than transforming it. Currently, I guess we're managing that and transforming it to a standard 18 file, which is the backs format. We'd actually either transform that into the Pain 001 that's required for a direct credit, or a Pain 008 if it was a direct debit request. So in other words, yes, we would manage that transformation on your behalf. Thanks, Debbie.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the question. I don't think there are any other questions. Obviously, if you do have any questions after the webinar, please just email Tom. And I think we're all good for now. So thank you, Tom, for your advice and recommendations on MT to CAMT transformation and the support side of things. As I said earlier, this is not the easiest topic to kind of dissect and explain. So thank you for explaining everything so clearly. Thank you all for your time and your questions. That's everything from us for now, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thanks a lot, Nav. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Tom. Thank you.
Cheers. Wow, that was